Hello and welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe, here with me is my co-host Dan.
Hello and greetings.
I'll just fix this up. It's out of place, but anyways, today we're discussing the Goldmoon Gilthanas pairing that we kind of implied could have been an interesting thing last week because, well, we released a possible love interest of Goldmoon, and what we ended up doing was that we had kind of not expected people to react the way they did to a possible Gilthanas pairing. I'm not gonna lie, I'm still partial to the Caramon idea, and we've got a video up, well, an upcoming video where we'll be explaining our. Well, at least I'll be explaining my viewpoint. Not sure about Dan. But the idea is that, like I said, I kind of had my mind on how Gilthanas, I wasn't sure about. I still am not entirely sure about a Goldmoon pairing to an extent, but people were really excited. I fall more in with the Caramon thing. The more I think about that one, the more I think this is a good idea. Whereas with Gilthanas and Goldmoon, that's what people want, so that's what people get. And the thing about this pairing is, before we get into this entire fanfiction thing, the two characters' first interaction is remarkably civil, which, when it comes to the Heroes of the Lance, is rather an oddity, because they're not always a civil bunch.
Often there's one conflict or another.
They're melodramatic people. And it's just a reality. And the thing is, usually the conflict involves Raceland in some form or capacity due to a certain amount of unreasonable hatred towards them. It is entirely unreasonable. Because after a man saves your life that many times and tries to sacrifice himself that many times, well, it starts to get a little unreasonable when you still dislike him. That said, Gilthanas, it's weird. We've had a bipolar set of reactions to him in the comment section. Some just outright hate him. Some outright love him. And I don't really see what's so controversial about the character. He's an out-and-out hero. He's a man who puts his nation and his family, primarily his sister, above everything else. And yeah, he's a little obnoxious to Tanis at one point, but his actions show him to be very loyal to Tanis. And in this regard, Gilthanas is one of the most upstanding characters. I've often compared him to Faramir, and now that I think about it, he is basically the same character to a large extent. The only difference is one's an elf and one's a Numenorian man. The other factor is that Gilthanas has a much more tragic love story and never had the writers really on his side. Let's just be honest. Neither Weiss nor Hickman have any use for Gilthanas. They don't like him. At least I got that impression. Faramir, Tolkien really liked him. Like, let's not sugarcoat it. He really likes Faramir. So you have these two different reactions to this, what's essentially the same character. The other thing with Gilthanas is that he, time and again, though his words were harsh with Tanis, his actions speak of a loyalty and love for Tanis. This is, it's loyalty really that defines Gilthanas. So one has to bear in mind that I think a few people said he's got a hatred for humans, but he doesn't show it. Remember how worried he is about Theros Ironarm? Yeah, Theros, it's evident Gilthanas really cared for Theros because Theros was helping the colonist out. That said, Goldmoon, for her part, heals him, not for the staff, but this is the first act of healing she does on her own. And so this is where this kind of got Gilthanas really fascinated and pleased, and he ends up later advocating for Goldmoon and the companions, and kind of almost putting his neck out on the chopping block, so to speak, with Celestra and Porthios, which, given how changeable and fickle and violent they are, not too far from the truth. I'm just going to say. So, from the very word go, Gilthanas shows his character. Goldmoon, for her part, doesn't really acknowledge Gilthanas in Autumn Twilight. It's fine. Then again, almost all of Goldmoon's interactions are with Tanis, Caramon, and Riverwind. She doesn't interact with any other character. Period. And I'd be curious to see how she might interact with Sturm, or Flint, or Tass, or... because we don't actually see these interactions. And of course, she has the usual verbal abuse towards Raceland, which...
That
you gotta be cool.
saying.
Yeah, you gotta be cool. She wants to be the cool girl, so she's gotta insult Raceland or threaten to destroy him or accuse him of being a traitor. You have to do that before breakfast. Like, I don't know about you, I do it every... I sometimes do it even before I've had my morning coffee. So the thing is, Goldmoon, this would require her to interact with someone other than Riverwind, which that's a miracle. And Tanis and Caramon. Now, she only has maybe one interaction with Caramon where she's, yeah, with that weird and creepy conversation when Caramon kind of pervs out a little over his sister. Which, okay, sorry. You look like that pained you.
Yeah.
Yeah. That scene is just so gross. And that's the thing, like, you've got in the context of this situation with this fanfic, we can't start at the very beginning of the story because Gilthanas does not show up till book 2 of Autumn Twilight. So what this means is the fanfic has to start right before that. Now, as you all know, this entire situation would rely upon Riverwind, not being revived. Because essentially the minute he was opened up and the acid ate through him, that's about it for him. But then, the authors kind of came to his rescue. Now, in this context, we would probably not have Goldmoon perish like she did, but we would end up bringing in the idea that Mishkal did kind of influence the destruction of the one dragon over in Saksaroth. So what this means is that you have Goldmoon, who's a fresh widow, and I remember someone proposed the idea that in one of the videos that this would have broken her resolve. No, I think it would strengthen her resolve to spread the healing of Mishkal if she had not arrived in time to save Riverwind. Now, make no mistake, this would be with the idea that by the time she reached Riverwind, he's already passed on. What this means is that she wasn't quick enough. So it's one of those situations where it might strengthen her resolve, and we're not going to look at Goldmoon as a weak-willed character, like what that comment seems to imply, because I think that comment kind of implies she's weak-willed, and, well, Riverwind is the source of her strength. And that Goldmoon as a character is derived from Riverwind. We're just going to argue Goldmoon is derived from Goldmoon as a character.
Yeah, there might be some self-blame.
But that gives her an arc.
Exactly, and that allows her to work to come to terms with Riverwind's death.
Yeah, so... And the thing is, throughout a good chunk of Autumn Twilight, her arc would revolve around Riverwind and his passing. Now, contrary to the actual book, the idea would not be to have... the thing with Riverwind was the companions did not... If you actually read the book over again, the companions don't get a good positive image of him. He's constantly questioning the honor of Sturm, who doesn't appreciate that. Raceland's not terribly impressed by Riverwind's intellect. Tanis, for some reason, is smitten with Riverwind. But if we were to remove that and say that and show that Tanis was not impressed with the insults, we get a very interesting image of Riverwind, where the companions saw him kind of at his worst. And then through this process, we then get to see that Goldmoon's vision of Riverwind and how he was in his younger days. And where she says, well, he once said this, or he such a might have given wisdom, and he might have actually genuinely been wise before he was traumatized from his rescue of the Blue Crystal Staff. And what this would do is that it creates a different image of Riverwind, one which is wiser, stronger, and more courageous. And so the companions knew him in his last days and were not, they didn't get to see, here, I'll just fix the camera. I always make this mistake. The companions did not see Riverwind at his best. But now they get to see him at his best through Goldmoon's memories. And this creates a dichotomy. And it does give depth to Riverwind, where the reason he was a bit of a jerk to say Sturm, or occasionally picked fights with Caramon, or ended up at odds with Tanis, was because he was traumatized. And in a way, the idea here would be to rescue Riverwind. Now, in some ways, I'll actually say he gets better scenes at a few points in Winter Night and Spring Dawning. But there's also the whole deal about, like all the other companions of Tanis' team, acquiescing to Tika taking her clothes off. That mars even Goldmoon. That mars every character in that team. And we have to bring it up because that's the sort of thing that we're going to try to smooth out here with this fanfic, because heaven knows somebody has to. Now that we have all that out of the way, before you hit the unsub button or something, bear in mind, we're just establishing the setting here. Like, we're just taking a bit of time just to do the setup. On the other hand, we have to build up Riverwind as a great man, because we have to convey that he earned Chieftain's daughter's love for a reason, and that what he endured in his years apart was that bleak, that bad. And so what this does is it gives us an idea of that in a way Goldmoon is not trying to overcome the loss of a man, but a giant in a way, a giant of a man. And it turns Riverwind into a bit of her mentor as well, which the death of a mentor is always a difficult thing to overcome. And so you have here this great, stupendous loss. And I would argue that with Goldmoon now basically an almost emotionally crippled widow, we can then start to have her try to overcome this great, like I said, loss, but also that she doesn't just dive into the Gilthanas romance. So much of the stream will not be about how they instantly start making out or something. No, we're just going to mostly get into Autumn Twilight, I think. And we're going to try to build up the pairing. But I think that the pairing would have to be built on a foundation of friendship. And this foundation will be absolutely important.
One of the first thing I'd say is shift Riverwind away from the noble savage, this strong, silent, noble savage type into...
Well, I disagree. No, you lean in at this point because that's all there is, to an extent. Like, there is more, but, like, that's the core of his character. You got to kind of lean into it and kind of lean into the wise man behind the noble savage. You have to do that. I know neither of us are terribly fond of that kind of archetype, but the thing is...
bringing him more into the magician archetype.
Well, he's the warrior archetype in the actual novel.
I know.
but you can't really move away from that, I would argue.
Oh.
Because Goldmoon's the magician archetype. And the other problem is that what you're talking about is completely making a different character in a way. And we got to stick with what we're given, I'm arguing. And just kind of attend flower and fertilizer to it.
Fair point.
Because the other thing is that you can't have like the kind of barbarian archetypal cycle with Riverwind that you get like with Conan the Barbarian or Call the Conqueror or Call the King, I mean. But Riverwind is like the Victorian era noble savage. We're stuck with that. We're not going to change that. This is not about fundamentally changing the entire novels and rewriting them. This is about, well, sort of, but this is more about changing Goldmoon's direction and attending to her character. I'm just talking about her reminiscing about Riverwind would show a wiser side to him and a gentler side than what the companions kind of saw, so that they're confronted by a duality of images. And
also leaning into the unreliable narrator.
Well, sort of, but we get to see that Goldmoon, she saw something nobody else got to see. She saw a side of Riverwind that nobody else got to see, and that Riverwind was worth it. That's my argument. And on Gilthanas' end, we're not going to show like just how bad his family life is, because it is bad. It speaks for itself. We're going to keep the scenes he has as they are. Here, I'm just taking my sweater off. And but the thing is, we're going to, when it comes to the word picture I'm trying to paint, it's that Goldmoon needs to, like, okay, at the beginning of book 2, she'd be almost emotionally crippled with loss. And her healing of Theros should not be just a scene in passing. It'd be almost a culmination of her character up to this point where she no longer needs that blue crystal staff. She doesn't need it anymore. You could break it over your leg and toss the pieces aside. It's worthless. The magic, it's like with the Schwartz. It's not, no, you found it in a Cracker Jack box. The magic's not in it, but in her now, in a way. But, well, the blue crystal staff will always be very important and powerful. But the idea is that now you cannot write Goldmoon out of the story, like what happens pretty much in Spring Dawning. You need her in the story. She is an integral character, and she is, when she heals Theros, it's her moment. Like, as Gallivant would put it, it's her moment in the sun. This is her moment. I love that song. But when it comes to, and thus, I think that with Gilthanas, his defense of her would just be the seeds of a friendship. And it's the friendship that we really need to attend to and take notice of and kind of focus on, because it is, well, it's like I said, it's the seed to, I'm just checking one thing real quick because I just remembered, just in case, let's see if the audio is working. Because I wouldn't want our audio to be, oh, I have the earphones in. Oh, yeah, we're all right. Oh, good. Just had to check that. But anyways, where was I? Oh, yeah. So we need to, oh, look, 2 people are checking out. Yay. 2 people more than before. But just to recap for those who just arrived, the idea is not by killing off Riverwind is not to, we're not trying to denigrate the character. Here, we would try to build him up as a giant in everyone's minds, because There are times when he's a bit rude to the companions, but Goldmoon would introduce them to the man she loved, the man she knew. And we get to see that he was a great guy. He was wise. He was traumatized, but wise. And you get a much better image of him in a way, but like one that shows a youthful man traumatized and who was heroic and noble, who passed before his time. On the other hand, when she heals Theros, it would be a moment which is the culmination of her entire arc up to this point. And we're not pushing for the immediate romance or instant love between Gilthanas and Goldmoon, because that would undermine both characters. Like, with Dragons of Autumn Twilight, which is going to be the main focus of this live stream, and going bit by bit over the story, I think it'd be important to bear in mind that they should start kind of with a core friendship. And this friendship will start off slow, because bear in mind, Gilthanas is pleased to meet a cleric of the true faith. And the discovery of a cleric of the true faith at this time is an amazing discovery, because it's the age of despair, when the gods and mortals have turned away from each other after the cataclysm that took place when the gods rammed a meteor into Istar. And that Goldmoon, thus doing a bit of a miracle, is a big deal, and that Gilthanas thus has a really good reason to stake his neck out on the chopping blocks to an extent for the companions. That said, a good chunk of the story would have to remain the same throughout the rest of Book 2 of Dragons of Autumn Twilight, except we might have Gilthanas' scholarly side maybe rear up and show up at least once, because it's not really shown, I think, in the book. And it's not that anyone makes a jab at him. It's just that Weiss and Hickman were kind of cramped for space, because, it's shocking how much they did get in there, because, like, look at the attention to detail they did have. They did a great job with a lot of the novel. It reads splendidly. It's a great novel. But we're only going to interject maybe 2 or 3 scenes at most. Maybe one where it's Goldmoon and Gilthanas may end up discussing maybe what's contained in the discs of Mishakal and the religion. Because we've got to bear in mind, Gilthanas is a scholar. Goldmoon would probably be keen to come to know this religion of hers. Now, with our idea, we'd also, because I don't know, like, the thing with Goldmoon is she comes from an illiterate civilization. So does she know how to read or write, or does she not? I don't know if it's made explicitly clear in Dragons of Autumn Twilight. So in that regard, we're going to lean into the idea she doesn't know how to read. And this is why they need to find someone who can read the discs, because sure, they have Raceland on hand, but they don't want him to read it, even though he's read it. Because
he's Raceland.
Yeah, nobody seems to want to give him the time of day. That said, you have, on the other hand, the gods who did choose someone very explicitly to read this, crack it open, and spread the good news to everyone, that the gods are coming back, and of the old ways. In that regard, they still need Elistan. Just because Gilthanas might be able to read bits and pieces does not make him the chosen by the gods. By no means is he chosen. I wouldn't choose him at this point in his life or career. He may be like Faramir, but he is a bit immature to an extent. Towards the end, he's like Faramir at his fullest, like at the end of the story. But Gilthanas at his core, like I said, is Faramir. And he ends up, I would argue, it might be interesting if he's the one who starts to teach Goldmoon to read and write. And thus, he starts to share with her what little knowledge he can glean from the discs. so that you might get a conversation between the two. It would just start as a friendship, primarily a meeting of the minds, and where Tanis might kind of... Now, here's the thing. Not to besmirch Tanis, but he does tend to blow things out of proportion. Him and Laurana have a lot in common. They're both melodramatic, and Tanis is going to blow this out of proportion to an extent and might think, like, it's a good thing your father and brother aren't here. They might be a little nervous about, you and a human, which, here's the weird thing. I don't think it would have occurred to Gilthanas.
Gilthanas is a person who
keeps everything private.
He's also very solution-based. He's a character that says, I don't want to linger on something. I want to solve the matter.
Yeah, but at the same time, he later ends up lingering over his sorrow over Silvara, which that's because he screws up that relationship. But it was built on a foundation of lies, so it was going to crumble no matter what. I know that's a cynical outlook, but I don't think there was a single thing she ever told him that was true. And it's a relationship which is really poorly... The foundations are poorly laid because she, like I said, doesn't tell him a single thing that's really true except I love you. But when everything else is a lie and that's the one truth, how can you believe it? And that's where, yeah, Gilthanas had set himself up for that one. But at the same time, the fact that Laurana doesn't see anything wrong with Silvara's lies is a little weird because that's her brother. But Laurana is someone who overemphasizes love above everything else. And she's got her own views on it, which I'm not going to besmirch or insult because she does make some good points about love throughout the trilogy. And you have Tanis, who does make some good points. I just think Tanis might overblow it a little. I think Goldmoon would be probably likely to go, what? No. Like, I just buried Riverwind. But weirdly, I don't think Goldmoon would react poorly to Tanis making this sort of assumption. I think she'd probably react like, no, there's nothing going on. He's just teaching me a little bit about reading and writing. It was either him or Raistlin or Caramon, and I'm not going to those two. And Gilthanas had made the offer, so I decided to accept. And I think it'd come down to that, and you have Tanis. Oh, okay. But Tanis would keep with his lingering doubts and whatnot. Tanis is someone I will praise one thing. He does have a tendency of, when it comes to people, he tends to, how do I put it? People say, I don't want this or I don't want that. I don't need this or I don't need that. Tanis instantly has doubts about that because he doesn't seem to trust what people say so much as it's their actions for the most part. Although he sometimes makes the mistake of thinking that actions and thoughts are not father to the deeds themselves. So what I mean is, le pensier appelle à l'action. Thought is father to action. And so, like, for example, threatening to kill Raistlin all the time, well, that's thought. That's the father to the actual act of doing it. I'm using that as an example because it's a pretty obvious one. But on the other hand, I think Tanis would think there might be something there. He'd be the first one because Tanis jumps to a lot of conclusions in Autumn Twilight. And yet, Tanis has really good instincts, I think, for the most part. And it's something that I've seen some people message me on Twitter and disagree with me, but even a few friends. But I'm like, I think Tanis has pretty good instincts. I don't like. I think that some of the characters, like Raistlin, have even sharper instincts. Gilthanas has better ones. But if you ask me who has some of the poorest instincts, actually, that's a hard one because most of the companions have pretty good instincts for the most part. A few of them don't. But I think with this sort of thing, when it comes to those lessons, I think Tass might get obnoxious. He definitely overhear at one point and whatnot, and be like, "Oh, what are they going off? What are they sitting in a corner doing? Oh, it's just reading and writing. Well, I can teach her that." And he completely makes a mess of things, and then it's just that's Tass. He's nosy. I love Tass, but I have to slip him into the stream and into the conversation
because he's Tass. He's a Kender. They'll find his way in the middle of everything.
You know what? He was what was missing from our potential love interest for Goldmoon. Okay, no, never mind. Okay.
I'd question Goldmoon's judgment then.
Okay, touche. No, you know who I would question even more? Parthios.
No argument here.
Yeah, Parthios, he's just trash.
Oh, yeah.
He's the worst. But that said, I think by the time they get into the Slamouri, what I would probably add a scene of, now that I think about it, would not be a Goldmoon Gilthanas scene, but a Goldmoon Laurana scene. One where you maybe have Goldmoon who's like, I'll talk to her, to Tanis. And where this is a scene purely about the friendship of Tanis and Goldmoon, and where we get to see Goldmoon take up the role of big sister of a chunk of the team a lot more. Which, kudos to Waste Nick, man. She did. Mm-hmm. She did end up. Remember, like, she did a good job. Like, I like the scene with her and Tika where she's like, but at the same time, I complain about it because you're giving too much to Goldmoon. But on the other hand, so in that regard, I think that scene should have gone to Laurana to further flesh out her and her differences with Tika. But on the other hand, I think that there is something there that's a nugget of a good idea. And the scene where she tells Caramon, talk to me as though you were my let us talk as though we were sister and brother. There, I think that this shows Goldmoon taking up the team, taking up the role of big sister to the team and trying to look out for them and help them. And I think if she were to step into that kind of role for Laurana, what this would do is it would position her in a way where she kind of bonds with Laurana. And honestly, I don't think she interacted with Laurana ever. And I really wanted to see those two interact. I know it's weird. I really wanted to see those two interact because Goldmoon is a much more seasoned woman in a way. Laurana is naive as heck. And what's also interesting is that Laurana is so sheltered. She's so innocent. She's not like, say, Arwen, who is wise. And I know, like, in our Arwen videos, you ended up concluding that Arwen did have you thought she was fairly immature when she entered into the marriage. I kind of disagree. But the thing is, Arwen, you can't argue she was wise.
Oh, no. She was wise.
And she was farsighted. And she is, like, she is someone who, she's very seasoned. She's not a warrior, but she's very seasoned in a way. And the years that she has seen have not been idle. They have left a mark on her, and she can see into the hearts of people. And she plays an important role in the household at Rivendell and even that of Lothlorien. Whereas with Laurana, she's very naive. Now, I have a fondness for Laurana, just as I do for Arwen. They're two very different characters and different archetypes. And I think with Laurana, what I would have liked is to have a kind of older female character for Laurana to interact with, a mentor in a way. And I think that this would have made things much more fascinating. And the interactions between the two would have been really, really interesting. And I would have wanted to see the two also interact with each other in Dragons of Dwarven Depths a lot more. So that, you almost have an entire book of the two ladies. Like Goldmoon, although she's not a warrior, kind of trying to convey to Laurana certain lessons she's learned. And Laurana has to wrap her head around the fact that, Laurana's actually pretty humble for a elvish princess. I say she's pretty humble for one, because we have to compare her to Alhannah Starbreeze, who's pretty arrogant. I like Alhannah. Like everyone knows, I like she's probably my favorite elvish princess of Dragonlance. But I think that it would be interesting to have Laurana have this big sister to interact with, and for Goldmoon to have this much more immature person who's actually older than her to interact with. So the two are in a weird position because not biologically, but like in years, Laurana's older, but in real world experience, Goldmoon's far older.
And something else that this would bring about is that we'd probably have Laurana and Goldmoon as narrators.
Well, sort of, yeah, but we'd also get to see the two interact, and this would actually give us a good female relationship, because the only female character that Laurana really interacts with is Kitiara, and that's pretty messed up. That's a messed up relationship.
It's Kitiara.
Yeah, Kitiara is pretty messed up. I love her as a villainess, but like, she's messed up. Ah, man. But I actually love the interaction at the end of Winter Night between the two. It's one of my favorite character interactions. And then, of course, the interaction in Spring Dawning, which is really, 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 really cool. But we're not there yet. Whereas on Goldmoon's end, she interacts a few times, I think, with Tika, but not entirely. And we gotta bear in mind that there aren't many heroines of the Lance. And that's not to fault Weiss and Hickman. They created a great set of novels, and they wrote what characters they needed for those stories. I would have loved to see Chrysania maybe, like in the reboot, end up one of the heroes of the Lance and end up in the Chronicles era, but we didn't get that. Mostly because let's have another female character. Her, either Chrysania or Alhana join the team, or both. Although maybe that'd be too much arrogance for the team. Maybe only Alhana. Chrysania's too cocky. But as for once in the Slamouri and once in the past the Slamouri, once they're in the actual dungeons, I think that with Riverwind not present to suspect Gilthanas of being a traitor, it might be interesting to see Goldmoon actually stick her neck out on that conversation. And I could see her probably, if she's formed a bit of a tentative friendship with Gilthanas and a bit of one with Laurana, which just the fact that Goldmoon would form a bit of a friendship with Laurana would get Gilthanas to start liking her more as a friend, because the thing is, she is actually defending his sister and bonding with her. And if there's one person who means the world to Gilthanas, it's Laurana. And so, yeah, like for this novel, this is not a romance, but so much as a budding friendship for the moment. There is, however, one little kerfuffle to our idea, our little fanfic, and that comes at the end, but that can be easily resolved. And I think everyone knows what I'm talking about. But for the moment, regarding Gilthanas, I think Goldmoon would defend him. I think Eben would probably tell her to be quiet. Tanis would probably be grateful to Goldmoon. And so we get Gilthanas also feeling a little grateful because somebody's defending his good friend and bro, Gilthanas, because Tanis was really married to the idea that Gilthanas would never betray the team. And the very fact that Gilthanas was accused got Tanis really up in arms. He did not like it. And especially as it was Eben who was doing the accusing, and Eben was... I got that feeling that maybe Tanis suspected Eben the most. And that kudos should be given to Tanis for saying, yeah, it's that guy probably.
Tanis was right on that matter.
But what strikes me as weird is that I don't think Gilthanas even fought to suspect Eben or... Anyway, I think Gilthanas suspected Raceland, actually, now that I think about it. Because Red Robe. That's where Gilthanas' prejudices against the red robes kind of comes in, because elves and black robes and red robes. But the thing is, then again, I can't remember what Raistlin was doing down in the caverns. You know, when he disappeared for a brief time? Because, you know, Eben disappeared, Gilthanas disappeared. Eben disappeared to go report to Pyros. Gilthanas disappeared to chase after Raistlin, but I think he lost track of him, and Raistlin just was off doing his thing, like skulking about.
Yeah.
If someone remembers, tell us in the chat, like what, or the comment section, if nobody ends up commenting in the chat, and they know what Raistlin was doing down there. I forget for the life of me. I didn't get much sleep. So, that said, when it comes to the traitor argument, like I said, it's Goldmoon kind of vouching for Gilthanas, if only out of the sense that he wouldn't do that. And I think we did end up probably building her up a little more with it in this story, because Goldmoon, we're suggesting, does know how to read people to a large extent. And I think we have to also bear in mind there's an actual core of the character here that is important. Goldmoon and Tanis have a great romance or friendship. I really like the friendship. And I know that someone said in the comment section that we should have considered Tanis and Goldmoon. And in hindsight, we should have put those two in. That as a possible pairing in the actual video. I'll admit it. Whoops. I didn't even see that possibility. It's because I guess I'm kind of married to the Tanis-Laurana pairing.
Same here.
I really like that pairing. Like, I think on both our first read-throughs, we were like, although we have our own opinions of both characters to an extent and how they behave early on, like, can you actually imagine? Like, I have a hard time imagining either one with another character.
Yeah.
Like, I've read the books where Tanis is with Kitiara. I actually really like those books, but I still end up thinking, yeah, Tanis is totally going to end up with Laurana. And I just have a hard time imagining the two with anyone else. Call it lack of imagination, call it folly, call it obsession with the pairing. I don't know. I can't imagine it. So, not to fault the person who proposed Tanis and Goldmoon. That'd actually be a pretty good idea. But I can't imagine it. But on the other hand, the person made an excellent point in that there is a seed of a great friendship here, because Goldmoon and Tanis have a great friendship. And I love the scenes we do get of them together, where they interact with each other, and you see her loyal side, and you see Tanis he just needs that friend. And it helps that it's from a lady in a way, because Tanis has been ill-served by Kitiara for a good chunk of his life. I like to think that some of his insecurities come from, yes, Solastron and Porthios, but some come from Kitiara. And
bringing a focus on Goldmoon's innate goodness and thinking the group needs to stay together. We can't be suspecting and looking over our shoulders at each other.
Unless it's Raistlin.
Of course. Even if we need to listen to him for his plans.
No, that'd be Tanis who'd think that, because Tanis understands Raistlin's the smartest guy in the room.
Goldmoon would think we shouldn't be so concerned about each other, worried about each other stabbing us in the back.
Well, yeah. I think, though, that she'd also want to side with Tanis out of loyalty and love for Tanis, and try to rally to his side. And Tanis would be grateful because he's got someone vouching for him, because nobody else seemed to be vouching on his side in the actual story. Goldmoon remained relatively quiet regarding the accusation leveled against Gilthanas, because she didn't actually bond with him quite as much in the actual novel, which, fair enough. And her husband was kind of one of the accusers. So that probably put her in an awkward position if she thought, yeah, he's not actually guilty. But here we're kind of removing that obstacle, so I think she'd probably dash to the defense, if only to out of loyalty to Tanis as much as it is out of loyalty to a new friend. On the other hand, I wonder if, like, it'd also be interesting looking at it from the point of view, say, Eben. I don't think Eben would, for example, see a Gilthanas Goldmoon possibility, but I think that, to a limited extent, but I think that what he would think is that she's attractive enough, but too tear-stricken and grief-stricken over some nobody loser who died before I showed up. Because Eben is a jerk, and just that wording, that sounds like, I think, something he'd probably think or say. It's like, well, I don't think he'd use the term loser, but like, I don't think he had respect for the dead. And I think that on the other end, Goldmoon might be a bit more emboldened, and I think might be willing to level her own accusation. But on the other hand, I think that this might be the only time we actually see kind of a semi-interaction. And I think that Goldmoon would probably end up kind of getting thanked by Tanis and maybe Gilthanas, but Gilthanas, I see him being a bit of a... I see him being rude enough to say something like, I didn't ask for you to defend me. I could defend myself well enough. And he does have that abrupt side. But so did Riverwind. So right there, she's instantly falling in love. I'm joking. Sorry. It's just, Riverwind had that brusqueness too. I'm just saying, him and Gilthanas both had that side to them.
Yeah.
But I think that Eben would still report, still flirt with Tika. Everything like that would happen the exact same way. I think that Gilthanas might be included in the conversations about the discs of Mishakal by Goldmoon. And you'd have them interacting and Ellie and whatnot. But at the end of the story, I'd probably... and we have someone in the chat. Rather than just talking to ourselves. Hey guys, just got home from running errands. Caught you. Yeah.
Hey, Stephanie.
Frederick. A pleasure to see you as always. We're discussing Dragonlance. I'm kind of a little sleep deprived, so I can't remember if you yourself are familiar with Dragonlance. But mostly we've been getting through Dragons of Autumn Twilight regarding this kind of fanfic stream, and where, well, to summarize, we basically got through the whole idea of Goldmoon being grief-stricken, and how she's that's kind of eating her up, but on the other hand, she's after the loss of Riverwind in this idea, and that she's basically decided to heal and spread the faith as much as possible because it's her mission by Mishakal. That said, the notion is that there would not be an instant romance like that between Goldmoon and Gilthanas. Rather,
it's slow burn.
Yeah, but there would be some accusers of that sort of thing because Tanis, Eben. Now that I think about it, Eben might only say something derogatory like, "Oh yeah, of course you're siding with the elf, given how much time you two spend together." And I think Goldmoon would color, that is to say, blush, and she'd probably be a little offended and say, "No, that has nothing to do with this. This is about the fact that he is innocent. He was not. No, he's not the traitor." Because at one point, the heroes of the Lance suspected a traitor in their midst when they got into Pax Tharkus. Okay, so all right, we'll keep going, but we'll try to slow it down even more because we got to introduce people who are, such as Stephanie, who are not familiar with Dragons of Autumn Twilight, which is a great novel, by the way. And the thing is, partway through the book, Goldmoon, who's the barbarian cleric, well, heals a dying husband of hers who's called Riverwind. We're saying, what if he died in order to give her character development? And where her story thus takes a completely different trajectory. And we had proposed in a Dragonlance video last week regarding who to pair her up with, and people apparently thought her with the elf prince Gilthanas, who's got a personality like Faramir, and also a bit like Orodra Thingon, and to an extent even Fingolfin. He's that valiant, perfect, elvish prince. And in a way, although he does have a temper, he does have a brusque side, he does have some flaws. His love affair in the second book is a disaster because it's built on a foundation of lies. And yeah, Gilthanas does not handle that like a champ. But for the most part, he handles the entire war pretty much like a champ, just coming to the rescue of everyone and cleaning up people's mistakes for the most part. Not exactly, but like he does muck up a lot. But that's like an elf prince from Tolkien. But the thing is, once in the bowels of Pax Tharkis, near the end of the first book of the Dragonlance Chronicles, the heroes of the land suspect a traitor. Someone has been selling out their info and their secrets to the enemy and has revealed their location to the enemy. This was supposed to be a secret operation because they snuck in for the tomb of Kif-Kanan, the greatest elvish monarch in Dragonlance history. So somebody has been spilling the beans. So there you have Eben, who recently joined them, who's the traitor. But his goal is also to spread deceit and disseminate treachery throughout the ranks. In the actual book, Riverwind was a captive audience of this idea, as was Caramon, Magir, another of the companions. So that the three of the humans turned on the one elf prince in terms of accusations. Tanis, who's a half-elf and the leader, and was raised as a foster brother to Gilthanas, is incensed and angered by this accusation and is the only one who defends Gilthanas. I don't think Gilthanas' own sister, defends him. But she's pretty angry with him for not wanting her to stick around because he thought she should just be sent back home because she tagged along. Sturm, I think Sturm's also lured into... Sturm also accuses... It's Sturm more than Riverwind. Yeah, because Riverwind does, I think, at one point support the accusation, but he's kind of more on the fence. Like, kudos to Riverwind. Because he's like, yeah, okay, I do think Gilthanas is probably the traitor. My bro Tanis.
Plus, you always have Raistlin as a possibility.
Yeah, because always got to blame the mage. But despite the mage pretty much being the most loyal team member.
And he doesn't really give himself a good argument.
No, well, he just says, I refuse to defend myself.
And I'm going to skulk away where you guys don't know where I'm going.
At one point. But then later when they say, where have you been? You know, because they're trying to figure out who the traitor is. He's like, you're just going to accuse me. I have no reason to defend myself. I don't care. Because by then they've already tried to sell him out, accuse him so many times that they're fed up with him. He's fed up with them. But the thing with Sturm is he would still be one of them that would accuse. But I think Sturm, for his part, now Sturm's my favorite character. So, of course, I'm going to rally to his defense. Dan's nodding a little too eagerly.
Yeah.
I think that Sturm would have a harder time maintaining his accusation if a lady is defending Gilthanas' name. Because Sturm is all about chivalry and honor. Es Suladosof Mifas. My honor is my life, as he would put it. So for Sturm, one has to bear in mind, in the actual book, Goldmoon did not defend Gilthanas, nor did she back up Tanis. She had good reasons for that, to an extent. And that's in that her husband was kind of on the fence. So she kind of wanted to support her man and not have more fights with him because they had been having quite a few. They had a few fights early in the book. But when it comes to no Riverwind being around, it means she doesn't have any reason to really hold herself back. So she's, of course, going to fall in on Tanis, who's her best friend in the team. I'm just saying that is essentially her best friend on this team. Out of all the team members, Tass annoyed her at one point, but she tries to be fond of him. Tika she likes. Caramon she likes. Most women in universe find Caramon irresistible in some way, shape, or form. She's not attracted to Caramon in this what if, but the idea is he does have like that kid brother side to him with some characters. Raistlin she doesn't like because nobody likes Raistlin. Flint she likes, but Flint also did not defend Gilthanas because Flint was like, I'm not going to participate in this particular fight. I'm too old. I don't care. But Flint did act as, I think, confidant for Tannis. Was like, I'll listen to you then, but like, I'm not getting involved in this. I don't want to touch this with a 10-foot long pole. Especially as Flint was too busy worrying over Tass, who had climbed up the mechanism because they lost him in a room where there was a banshee, and Flint was basically going, "My baby, we left Tass behind," and I'm not going to judge Flint there, like, because Flint kind of saw it as no man gets left behind, except maybe Raceland.
Because Raceland's Raceland, him and his sterling personality.
Yeah. But that said, the thing with this accusation is that Sturm, I don't think, would hold as strong to his accusations, because he'd be like, because when Eben pretty much probably makes a derogatory accusation about Goldmoon and Gilthanas, I think that Sturm would be a little offended by that, because you don't do that to a lady. And it's just that Sturm is probably the most chivalrous character in all of fantasy fiction. Period.
And it would probably also make him think, this guy's trying to turn us against Gilthanas, and then he accuses a lady of such a thing. That's something that one should be suspicious about.
But on the other hand, let's give Eben credit. Eben's not stupid. He was pretty clever. And well, okay, he is a little dumb, but like I think that Eben is smart enough to actually kind of go, okay, I gotta backtrack. I gotta apologize. I gotta, disseminate and kind of replan this. And that's something that honestly I don't think enough people give Eben credit for. Like, just how skillfully he spread dissent in the ranks. And
because in many ways it wasn't that hard to do.
No, it wasn't. On the other hand, I think it was only really Raceland who immediately knew he was a traitor. Although I don't think, if Raceland had made the accusation, he'd have been killed in an instant. I don't think he would have survived the day.
And I think Raceland was well aware of that. They were only going to listen to him after it was revealed.
That's always the case. But I think that Tannis suspected on some level. Like, Tannis was like, you're trying to turn us all against Gilthanas. No. I think that, on the other hand, I also think Laurana suspected. Because let's give Laurana some credit. That's her brother. But that said, I think that when it comes to Eben, I think that I don't think Flint saw through it, but Flint has a bit of a naive side. He does want to believe in some people. And I think that, how do I put it? Most of the team probably didn't see through him because he was crafty. But I don't know if Goldmoon would see through him. But I think what's most remarkable is that Gilthanas I don't think saw through Eben per se. Like, I think in the actual story, he kind of wanted to believe in Eben. Although I do think he did say it's a little weird that he survived the way he did. And so I think on some level, Gilthanas knew, but on the other hand, Eben was part of his original band that infiltrated the Slaw Mori, and they barely made it out. And I think that, well, they were supposed to infiltrate, and then they ended up ambushed. But I think that he didn't want to believe, in the worst. It shows a remarkable gullible side to Gilthanas, but also an idealistic side to his character, which let's commend, because, Gilthanas was an elf raised to hate humans. And yet he wants to believe in human beings, which, like I said before, he lives up to every ideal of the Qualinesti elves. The Qualinesti believe in, if not integration with humans, then at least cooperation. And I think on the other end, it might be interesting with Goldmoon, who's been raised with the prejudices against the elves, to, that's why this romance is actually a pretty interesting idea, I guess, because you've got Romeo and Juliet.
What I find very interesting is in such a pairing, we'd be able to elaborate on a lot of lore that could have added with both their cultures.
Yeah, especially the question of Qualinesti.
Where they'd be able to have discussions about histories, about stories.
Stop spoiling my ideas for Winter Night. The start of Dragons of Winterlight. I'm joking.
Because it's like Goldmoon thing. Well, I remember one of the ancestors of my tribe. The story goes like this, and then you have Gilthanas. According to the Elven records, this is what happened during that war.
Or she might say, I remember we spoke of this guy, Gilthanas. Oh, he was a jerk. You met him? Yes. He's an elf and he's lived for centuries. And I think that would also be a little funny. But on the other hand, I think that we get to see, on the other hand, I think that with the story ending with, the battle at the end, I think one thing I would change would not be Goldmoon coming to the rescue and helping defeating Verminard, because honestly, that always annoyed me. You had her come back from the dead. You had her kill a dragon. Enough. And those felt like a little Deus Ex Machina-ish. But I find that the problem I have with her defeating Verminard, now that I think about it, is that it's treated like that's the culmination of her story. All right, we finished Goldmoon's story. Time to write her out of the story. We don't need Goldmoon in the story anymore. No. Nonsense. You do need her. So I would have, honestly, I wanted her to defeat the Night Lord, the guy who's doing the experiments over in Naraka. Because he's the ultimate, he's Dark Pope. He's a Dark Pope over of the faith of Takesis, the ultimate devil or Morgoth figure of Dragonlance. Yes, Stephanie Frederick. The Morgoth or Melkor of Dragonlance is a goddess, not a god. But she's basically if Melkor decided to incarnate into a female shape. And I'm just saying. But Takesis is almost that wicked and cruel for no reason. It's what's so great about her character. I love Takesis as a villainess. But yeah, I think that having the Night Lord be the ultimate foe of Goldmoon should have been the end goal. I honestly, I know he's elaborated upon in Dragons of the Hourglass Mage, but having this goal, building up Goldmoon into kind of one of the ultimate clerics in Kryn rather than dropping her halfway, and having her having this antithesis to her, so that you have the two, you have a battle of the ultimate clerics. That'd be so cool. But Verminard was never of yeah. Verminard is a great warrior, but I wanted I remember a while back when we were recording the last Dragonlance podcast video, which is an hour long, and I'm sorry, it's taking so long just to edit through that. It's just the audio is so long. It takes me weeks just to get through 1 hour there, of that kind of content, because we end up getting into every detail. But I think that on the spot, I think I'd want it to be Tanis, who maybe does them in, or maybe to an extent Gilthanas, because now that I think about it, this guy did ambush Gilthanas' team and humiliate Gilthanas in the eyes of Qualinesti, and kind of kill a lot of people that Gilthanas had thought of as his friends and brothers.
It would be appropriate for Gilthanas to take him down.
Okay, I guess.
And it would help confirm that Gilthanas can be trusted.
Okay, but that means he has to kind of come to the rescue. Now, why did Goldmoon not defeat Verminard? Here, I'll actually bring in what someone's criticism said about Goldmoon maybe having some doubts and this weakening her clerical abilities. See, I'm not just bashing you. I'm kidding. Never argue with the comments section or chat. But I think that the person makes a good argument to an extent. I just wish I could remember who made that comment. Was it Brendan Gee? I don't think it was. I can't remember. I wish I could remember. But
the thing is, because Brandon D always disagrees with our views
Which
all the time.
we do appreciate.
Yeah, because we do need a dissenting voice in the comment section, because if it's just everybody agreeing with you, it gets boring. Like, there are times when you want the agreement, and there are people who agree with us and say, but you need to, like, here's what I think. And then they give this really excellent point of view and they elaborate in a way that I never would have thought of. But on the other hand, then you get people who disagree with you. They bring points of views you didn't think about or whatnot. You expand your horizons. That's always so much fun as a YouTuber. And what I can't wait to see someone do is if someone was to make response videos, like in the Tolkien community, for example, and where it's like, because I know sometimes you'll have Tolkien Lore Geek, Red Book, and Girl Next Gondor bouncing off each other, and sometimes Dork Lords, and it just gets really interesting seeing the three bounce off each other from video to video. But anyways, I think that in the final battle, we're kind of going to do a quick verbal rewrite of that. Raceland being defeated, I guess. Yeah, I'm a little reluctant. I guess I'm a Raceland fanboy. Sturm getting defeated, I'm horrified because I'm a bigger Sturm fanboy than of anyone else. He's the greatest. But Caramon getting defeated, okay. Although let's bear in mind Caramon's supposed to be a major warrior. But Verminard is a really good fighter. Let's give him that much. Tanis getting defeated, I kind of think here I'm a little reluctant. On the other hand, when Goldmoon comes to the rescue, I would propose that she she ends up faltering. And we have to bear in mind that I don't think Mishikal should be as powerful as Takesis. I know it's harsh, but the weird thing for me is that while I do think that to an extent she is just as powerful, because, you know, healing is stronger than destruction. But on the other hand, it's supposed to be that Takesis is the, you know, like the only ones amongst the gods who might rival our strength are Gillian, Paladin, maybe Sargonis, like of the main pantheons. So, and I'm only propping up Sargonis because he is really powerful. And I really like Sargonis as a villain as well. He's basically he's David Xanatos from Gargoyles if he didn't have the ethics and he was a god. Because David Xanatos has some ethics. But Mishikal, I don't think should be strong enough to chase away Takesis. But on the other hand, I think Takesis felt it was too soon for this sort of challenge. And on the other hand, Takesis is kind of weakened, at least in the mortal plane. So to an extent, she might be willing to flee, but I would put it down to it's about faith. Verminard has very few doubts about his goddess. Goldmoon has a sliver of doubt still living in her. And I will say that the tale should weave into it that there is still a sliver of doubt in Goldmoon in Spring Dawning, so that when she goes to confront the Night Lord. And it's only during that battle that doubt is at last cast away and that faith is restored in Goldmoon's heart, because, you know, you need that character arc, that hero's journey. And that the death of Riverwind put in her doubt, just as the death of Ben Kenobi put doubt in, well, Luke Skywalker. And then when he hears his voice saying, "Let go, Luke," you know, faith is restored. And he's able to take the leap of faith and, you know, save the day. So here with Autumn Twilight, I'm going to propose her faith falters, so she's not able to properly call upon the power of Mishikal in battle. And so Verminard quickly knocks her aside. And I would propose that Gilthanas tries to come to the rescue soon enough, but really I would have it that Tanis tries to rescue her, is maybe outmaneuvered and beaten back. And I'm pushing forward Tanis because I also want to push forward the Gilthanas-Tanis bromance. I really like that bromance. I'm not going to lie.
And since we're pushing Gilthanas and Goldmoon, we have to consider Gilthanas' family.
Yeah. And so Gilthanas comes to the rescue of Tanis, and I'd want Verminard to maybe be about to deliver the final blow, and you have Gilthanas who who engages Verminard in battle. He's beaten back. Yeah, I'm building up Verminard. But if anything, I'd probably want Goldmoon to kind of defeat Verminard in that she tries to come to the rescue of Tanis and Gilthanas, but it's her staff sparkling that kind of blinds Verminard temporarily. Gilthanas then tries to strike him from maybe behind her from the side. And because of the helmet staying true to the actual book, because this was an idea that I did like where Verminard's like, the stupid ceremonial helmet, I can't see out of the sides. And so when Gilthanas goes to deliver, that blow, it's a matter of him going, shoot, I can't see him. I took my eyes off him for a second because of that stupid ray of light from the blue crystal staff. And thus, it is Goldmoon who defeats him, but not through power, but rather through an inadvertent action and more subtlety, where it's, yes, her faith in a way did pull fruit, but at the same time, she did not defeat Verminard directly. It's the staff sparkling, temporarily blinding him, and then Gilthanas taking advantage of it to maybe cut off his sword hand, and then him and Tanis basically skewer him, and maybe Sturm too while we're at it. But where Gilthanas basically defeats him and deals the killing blow, and the other two join in because why not? He's not dead enough, like in the actual story. So here, the idea is that we're trying to stick true to the thematic ideas here. Goldmoon has to play an important role in the defeat of Verminard, in hindsight. But Gilthanas should get the killing blow. On the other hand, Tanis should play a critical role in the fight. And so we're trying to stay close to that, as it is very important to stay true to the themes and ideas that Weiss and Hickman put together, because this is not our baby, this is their baby. And the idea is we're not trying to bash them as writers. We have to pay homage to them. Weiss and Hickman's vision for Dragonlance has to shine through, and we have to kind of push forward their characters as much as possible here, at least in the context of the Chronicles. And now there are some creative decisions I do disagree with later on with them, but on the other hand, at least in regards to Second Generation and Age of Mortals, but on the other hand, I do think they made some really good decisions as well. But with the Chronicles, which are probably the most important trilogy in Dragonlance history, it is essential that we stay true to the vision. And so as for Dragons of Autumn Twilight, at the end, I would argue that though there is not a marriage to celebrate, which it's a shame we don't have that, because that was key to the epilogue. But I would argue that no matter what, the refugees would have had a celebration. They were looking for a celebration after, well, everything they've gone through. They were enslaved in the mines of Pax Tharkis. They had little joy. The new gods have been discovered. It's time to have a festival. And they won a victory. They won a victory. But if they're not, now I think that maybe to an extent, I will brag. I hope it's not taken too badly. That might be a little more interesting if the people celebrate the actual victory of the battle rather than the marriage, although the marriage does play a very important role. But what I'm thinking is, if they're celebrating the victory and they're like, yahoo, we won, yay, down with Verminard, no more evil dark cleric tyrant in this area. It's great. And then, they might hear back from Colonesti, oh yeah, the army sent out there was smashed by the people of Colonesti. Solastron and Parthios still fled because they're Solastron and Parthios. But the problem remains from the point of view of Raceland that you won a minor battle. You slew a dragon high lord. Yay. There's still like what 7 or 8 or 20 of those. Like they still got so many dragon armies. They still have Ariakas. They still have like an entire empire's worth of army on top of the undead of Lord Soth to rally behind them. And you're going to celebrate the loss of one guy and one army. Yeah, well, a good chunk of that army has also fled east, and they're going to rally under a new guy once the other Dragon High Lords appoint a new guy over the command of that army. There will be another battle. The war is not over. The war has but begun. And I think that the celebration of a great victory here would be scorned by Raceland. And I think it would just earn it would earn even more ire from him. And I think that Tanis would see it as, well, yeah, we'd still get the same dialogue. Like, we won a victory, didn't we? Yes, but hope is the denial of reality, as Raceland puts it. So what? You'd have us not hope? No, I didn't say I'd have us just give up. Remember Raceland's important lesson at the end of Dragons of Autumn Twilight. Let's take the carrot is there to keep the plow horse going. Let's take the carrot away, toss it aside, and see reality for what it is. Let's see the situation for what it is. Not what we want it to be, not what we wish it was, but what it is. And so we still get that excellent scene. And really, Dragons of Autumn Twilight remains the same, only changed for the fact that Gilthanas maybe defied Tanis' orders to come to his rescue. And this builds up into Dragons of Winter Night, where we would get to see what comes next after that celebration. Now, of course, you have the story of Dragons of Dwarven Depths, but I've not read it lately, and so I forgot a bit of it, the story, I will admit. But I'll just probably say it might be best to follow with what it had in mind completely, and we're not going to do too much fan fiction there, because if I don't fully remember it too well, especially in my sleep deprived state, I don't think it'd be very respectful to poke my nose into that story. I remember Dragons of Winter Night so well because, well, I've read it about once a year for almost 20 years, so I do remember it pretty well off the top of my head. And it's only been a few months since I last read it. And I think it's been like a year since you read it and last read it. Like, I'm not counting for this podcast or whatever. But I think that for Dragons of Dwarven Depths, the most I might say is there should be 1 or 2 scenes, once again, with Goldmoon and Gilthanas mostly bonding over reading and writing in old stories and lore. And I also think maybe Goldmoon and Lorana. I'd want more scenes with those two because, honestly, Goldmoon as big sister and Lorana as little sister it's just such a stroke of genius on our end, I think. On the other hand, I think that what would also be needed by Dragons of Winter Night is to have a conversation between Tanis and Gilthanas. And I think that Tanis would be a little upset about Gilthanas defying his orders because you should have listened to me back at Pax Darkus. How can I rely on you to follow my orders? And Gilthanas would see it as, I saved your life. And I told you, Tantalos, I'm not under your command. And technically it was Gilthanas' operation, not Tanis's. But over the course of the story in Dragons of Winter Night of Autumn Twilight, Gilthanas had ceded authority to Tanis. Now, once the refugees are rescued, I would argue that Gilthanas' mission is complete. And technically he should return to Qualinesti. Because, he shouldn't be sticking around. But we got to bear in mind Lorana's determined to stick with the companions, and Gilthanas is determined not to abandon the refugees or his sister. And I think even by extension, to an extent, Tanis. But now we're going to kind of get into the start of Winter Night. Now, at the start of the story, only took us like, what, an hour and a half? Yep. Because we kept doubling back and whatnot, and I kept stuttering. So, anyways, Winter Night starts with the companions in, Thorbarden. I love Thorbarden. the Mountain Dwarves. I love the Mountain Dwarves. So much lore. I really hope the OGL does not. I really hope if it gets pushed forward again, it gets defeated again. I want to make content on Thorbarden. I love those dwarves. Sorry, I like the dwarves of Dragonlance. I may complain a little about Flint, but I do love Flint. I love the dwarves. Dwarves in fantasy are just some of the best. But sorry, I'm a dwarf lover and an elf lover. But in Dragonlance has great elves and dwarves in spades. But then again, Dragonlance is one of the best freaking fantasy universes ever. So sorry, I think since this is a Dragonlance stream, I'm allowed to just geek out and just gush about Dragonlance.
Yeah.
But anyways, Winter Night. Need to go look at something or something?
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
I'll go check up on something.
Oh, the dog?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, you do that. I'll keep people busy. So Winter Night. At the start, the companions have found the hammer of Karis, which is used to forge the Dragonlance of old, which is kind of the titular name of the franchise. And the thing about the Dragonlances, if you'll recall, is that for those of you who are familiar with Dragonlance, is that the mythos is that it was the Dragonlances that turned the tide in the war, in the second war, I think, of dragons. And in the Dragons War, it was Huma Dragonbane, the greatest hero in Dragonlance history, in Kryn's history. He wielded pretty much almost a divine Dragonlance, the greatest Dragonlance. And on atop the dragon heart, that's her name, she was a silver dragon, he wounded Takesis, which now Takesis had incarnated herself into the shape of a five-headed dragon, I think, and a multi-headed dragon, basically a hydra, a winged one, a giant one. And Huma somehow defeated her with a blow of his dragon lance. And he made her swear to never return to Kryn. But the thing is, she's decided to break her word because, you had the Cataclysm, which kind of opened the doorway a sliver, and then Barum, the green gemstone man who has a gemstone embedded into his chest from kind of trying to swipe the rock from the stone that opens the doorway to the abyss. So that opened the door, another crack. But at the start of Winter Night, the hammer which forged the Dragonlances of old has been found and delivered to the dwarves by the companions. And this is done in order to buy the refugees of Pax Darkus a home in the kingdom of Thorbarden. That is to say, just outside the mountains, because the mountain dwarves live within the mountains, but they need people to tend the fields and the farms outside. So they're willing to give over the land in return for crops. And what this does is it ties the people of my internet's a little weird. It's unstable. Okay, I'll just give it a minute because I'm worried about that. I don't know why our internet keeps giving us trouble. Let me see. But, okay. Basically, the deal is almost a feudal deal. You give us the hammer, we give you land. We need it tended. You need the protection from the dragon armies and from everyone. Pretty good deal. Thorbarden is not perfectly secure, but it's one of the most secure places in all of Ansalon, the main continent. And I think what we need to bear in mind is that just as so the same scenes will play out. Raisin will still end up kind of insulting the leaders. The high what was it? I think the High Seekers. It's the High Seekers.
Actually, could you get me the Rolo drink from downstairs or the caramel? All right. I think the High Seekers. The scene will still play out the same. I think the same. Everything will play out the same, and I think that at least at the start. So, yeah, you've got Elistan and the High Seekers still debating about what to do. Some are not happy. Elistan is still foolishly pushing forward Tarsus as a solution, and it's great port because they're relying on Tasseloff Barefoot's map from before the Cataclysm, before the gods threw a meteor at Ancelon to punish it for its hubris. And we are still going to get Sturm being miffed about handing over the hammer. And we're still going to get everything like it was. But the difference is that Goldmoon will probably... Now, she'll follow out of belief in Tanis, yes, but still out of obligation towards the masses, towards healing people and helping them with it and with their sorrows. Basically, she's a saint. But the other thing is, she's following... Sorry, it says shake. And she's following out of a sense of failure over Verminard. And this would, I think, offer her a bit of an insecurity to overcome in the story. And the thing to bear in mind is that though there was a corporeal victory over Verminard, Verminard won a bit of a victory in that when Goldmoon doubted, her resolve weakened and she was not able to defeat him in a cleric battle. And so she would follow the companions out of a sense of just, she's still heartbroken over the death of Riverwind, but there's a sense of failure. She failed, and she wants to prove that she can find her faith again. She can be the strong cleric she once was. And in this way, she is overconscious of her failure and feels that she failed the companions and that she has to repay them in some way, and that she has to prove to herself that she can do this. She can do this. She can go the distance. But also that you'd have in turn... yeah, okay. Take care, Stephanie Frederick. No problem. But anyways, I think, and there goes, I think, the last of our viewers. I think that on Gilthanas' end, he's going to stick around out of obligation to his family and to the refugees. So I think that with Goldmoon knowing how to read and write, and her cracking open the discs, just as Elistan is, you thus have, two heads better than one, and you have maybe her discussing the old ways with Elistan, but also Gilthanas. And I think that, and I think I got to stop using that phrase, I think that. But the reality is that on the journey to Tarsus, Goldmoon and Gilthanas would probably end up discussing amongst themselves the old stories of the old clerics, the old gods. And I could see Raceland probably eavesdropping on a lot of those conversations because he'd be interested in those conversations, and that would not endear him to either. But the reality is that Goldmoon and Gilthanas would bond over these tales, but also tales of the Question and the Qualinesti. And what's more is that I think that Tanis would be suspecting more and more that there's something brewing there. I think Raceland would probably take the attitude, I don't care. It's just in Raceland's nature to just have this attitude towards other people's business. I don't care. Unless it can... Well, he likes people's secrets, but when it's out on public display, his attitude is,
Oh, that's boring.
yeah, he's like a child that way. And I think with Caramon, I think it'd be Caramon who'd kind of embarrass the two. He'd make some comments.
Which would be unwelcome.
Well, I think he'd tease them a little, primarily Chieftain's daughter. He'd try with Gilthanas, and Gilthanas would just be so withering and distant. I think Caramon would be like, okay, I tried. But with Goldmoon, I think, on the other hand, Caramon might actually, this might be where it gets a little endearing. It might be a little jerk-ish at first, but just because he's being pervy. But on the other hand, I think that there'd be a touch of teasing, just taquineur.
That boyish.
Yeah, because he does have that side. He might tease her more, like, I've noticed you've been spending a lot of time with our elf prince there. And the thing is, Goldmoon would probably tell him that's none of your business. But on the other hand, the fact that she blushes and would say, and the thing about Goldmoon is, remember, teasing her about even Kitsiara and Riverwind caused her to blush. This does not mean there's a thing going on between her and Gilthanas yet. It'd be a matter that Caramon is saying embarrassing things. And Caramon would think that's funny. And he'd tease and tease and tease. It's just, Caramon is a man's man. Like, for those familiar with Game of Thrones, I'm not the biggest fan, but the only character I think I kind of liked was Robert Baratheon for the most part. I just thought he was funny. And so dumb sometimes, but also so perceptive at other times. And so pitiable. But there are a few other decent characters, I will admit. But I think Caramon has that same sense of humor. And the thing is, minus all the toxic side, because Caramon's way better adjusted. And I think that the thing with Caramon is he would probably end up teasing her in a similar style. And Goldmoon would just make it easy. And I think that's really where, like, I think Tika would find Caramon funny during those times. Raistlin would just find it irritating and vulgar and would tell him, don't be vulgar, brother. But it's Caramon. He can't resist his nature. And I only get into the perception of the companions because that does play a role to an extent. And I think that in a way it would be father to the deed. What I mean is people would suspect there's something brewing before there's even anything brewing. And at the start, there'd be just a friendship between Goldmoon and Gilthanas. There would be nothing. Because bear in mind, Goldmoon is a grieving widow. And I just say that's a very important factor because it is, like, she's not going to jump into bed with another guy when, she's still got a husband she's grieving. And I think on Gilthanas' end, I don't think he'd want to because, that'd be disrespectful.
Yeah.
That said, I think that what would start to happen is that you'd have some teasing, some suspecting, and I think that what would start to happen is the two would become kind of consciously aware of these whispers. Now, the thing is, the Heroes of the Lance are a gossipy bunch. They do gossip. It's funny.
You know how I imagined that one of the thoughts might first some might first suspect? A misunderstanding in Taz's wording.
Yeah.
Because Taz tends to eavesdrop.
I forgot about that. Yeah, Taz.
And sometimes, and it might be before anything happens, Taz words things that everyone's turned around and looks at the two.
Well, not exactly, but like, not all at once. Like, no, like, I think he might misword it and just be Taz, because he's Taz. He might end up saying something to maybe Tanis and maybe Lorana and Flint or something. And, well, maybe Lorana's within hearing range. You never know with elf ears. I don't know how well they hear in Dragonlance, now that I think about it, because it's never really elaborated upon in the stories. Now, I know in D&D, I know about the stats and whatnot, but stats are not the story to an extent, I would argue. I do love the D&D stats. I do tend to
They can play a role in modules and adventures, but I tend to separate the actual character creation process from the actual characters. But I think that now, like Tolkien's elves had really good hearing and eyesight, but I don't know if they had pointed ears. I don't know if Tolkien ever described it as such. It's one of those weird things where I think Hollywood picked it up and ran with it, and I don't think there was ever anything said about it by Tolkien. But you know what? It's something that I think I kind of like, the pointed ears of the elves. It differentiates them visually. We need that visual identifier. But anyways, so Tass makes a glib, weird, gossipy comment, and I think Tanis would be like, you know, I kind of like the thought briefly flitted into my mind, like back in Pax Tharkus, but then I kind of forgot about it. I didn't really pay attention, but it's actually a thing now. It does. Then Tass misunderstands what Tanis is trying to say. Yeah, that might happen. And then it clarifies, because it would be clarified to Tanis, and you have Tass. No, what I meant was this, and you might have Tanis like, oh, but still. Like, then the thought won't be able to get out of Tanis's mind.
And then you have Flint comment, wait, you're taking the Kender's words seriously?
On either front. And yeah, I just think it'd just be one big misunderstanding and kerfuffle on the road. And I think that, well, actually, maybe it would happen before they hit the road. And then, you know, they're on the road, and you've got this vague suspicion. And I think that with Tanis, he'd go, I don't think I like this idea. But on the other hand, I think that Tanis, as he's getting on the road, I think he'd be like, what's going to come of that? Like, he's going to kind of wonder and kind of go, if something does happen, what kind of father to a half-elf would Gilthanas be? Goldmoon, do you think she'd be a good mom?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, okay, no one's going to even question that, like, except maybe Rayson, but he can be a bit of a jerk. But Rayson thinks she's dumb. So, like, I'm actually going to kind of dismiss what Rayson thinks here. Like, but Goldmoon would be a great mom. And I think that Gilthanas, though, would be the one odd man out here. And I think that that's what would worry Tanis, because he'd be like, how will Gilthanas treat a half-elf kid? Bear in mind, he was raised by Solostrin, and Porthios is his older brother. And you'd have him just worry about this. And what would happen to Goldmoon? Like, I think Tanis would start to stress out a little over this, Tanis was also stressed about his role as leader with good reason. You know, he doesn't want to destroy the team. And he is a good leader. Like, he is thinking about what's best for his friends and family. But I think like a corner of his brain would be worried about this. And I think that, on the other hand, Tanis would want to approach it because it's Gilthanas. Let's bear in mind, he did have a soft spot for Gilthanas. I think that it's just that the two had respect for each other as men. Like, it was not the heated relationship I think some people imagine. Although Tanis deluded himself into thinking that Gilthanas would happily see him dead, I don't think that's the case. And I think that what would happen is that Tanis might end up asking Gilthanas. This is where I think Tanis would try to approach it in a civil manner. And he was always, I have to stress this, he was always very civil with Gilthanas. If anyone, I will grant you, if anyone was being rude, it was Gilthanas. But Gilthanas is just brusque by nature. So, hey, a few times Gilthanas is rude to Lorana. But I may love the character. I may be a Gilthanas fanboy, but let's be honest, he does have his moments. I think Gilthanas would just tell him, mind your own business, essentially. Not in those words, but essentially, do not meddle in my affairs, Tantalos. And you have Tanis. Okay, not talking to him, because evidently he doesn't want to talk about it. And I'm not going to get anything out of him, and not even think about, like, if something does happen, like, remember your rank and your position and the situation here.
Which that is something I wanted to bring up, because Gilthanas is the son of the speaker.
Of the sun, yeah.
And him getting together with a human would cause issues to his position.
Well, bear in mind, he's halfway disowned by his dad by the time of the Chronicles. I only say he's halfway disowned because at no point is he treated like a proper son. And bear in mind, it's all right. Here's a suicide mission that maybe the speaker should lead, because he's got the succession secured. Maybe he should do it because, you are also a war leader. But, instead I'll give it to my throwaway son and have him do it and throw his life away. What do I care? And I know I'm very harsh with Solostrin, but, like, as far as I can tell, he seems to care for Porthios, Laurana. That's about it. And I just don't like the character. And the thing is, Gilthanas is the throwaway son. They keep giving him the dirty jobs. Like, okay, we need someone to go with the Kaganesti elves. Gilthanas, you're going. We need someone to go rescue the refugees. Go, Gilthanas. I have dirty laundry. Go pick it up, Gilthanas. Like, he's the guy they give the dirty job to. So it'll affect his position and ability. Yeah, but he doesn't even have a proper rank in the eyes of his father and brother, who keep seemingly demoting him in terms of influence.
When his brother and father pretty much ditch.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. Let's also bear in mind that after the death of Solostrin, and Porthios is removed from the position of speaker, the nobility basically don't even think to send a message for Gilthanas. They basically say, all right, well, he's not in the succession. We go to Laurana and Tanis. Technically, Tanis is not in the succession. And Laurana, she should not come before, like, her and her son Gilthas should not come before Gilthanas in the succession. But Gilthanas is not even considered. So that, I would accrue to him all but being disinherited. And he somewhat is. Not officially, not directly, but he's not really in the line of succession to an extent. Does he even have rank? Which, that's the sad truth of it. He should actually be, I'd argue, like, nominate him to next speaker because Porthios is unworthy. Laurana just needs maturing. She could be, okay, and maybe Gilthas could have used time, but I just don't think Porthios should inherit. And I think Gilthanas is perfect for the job.
Yeah, yes. Gilthanas understands what it means to lead a nation.
Yeah, because he actually understands you have to compromise and take. There should be sacrifices for your people. Your people come before you. Gilthanas is the only one in the royal family who seems to think like that. And, well, okay, I'll give Tanis this much. Tanis thinks like that. Tanis does sacrifice himself for others and what he wants for others. But Solostrin and Porthios, never. Actually, I'll even say that over with the Sylvanesti. Alhana Stark actually understands this. Lorak, I'm not so sure, but I don't know. Lorak is a fool. He does have some good traits, though. And he did have good intents when he used the Dragon Orb. That said, so in that regard, Tanis would probably not, I'm not going to use the word confront because that suggests he went in with the intention of squabbling. I think he'd go in with the intent of, okay, I'm a half elf and I don't want, if you're going to have a kid or like in a relationship, relationships often leads to kids. Just be careful. And if you get with a human woman, like, bear in mind how she'll be treated no matter what. And I only bring this all up because this would be what Tanis is worried about. On the other end, I think that with Goldmoon, Tanis would approach her as well. But Goldmoon would be a little cold at first because Gilthanas would have told her, hey, looks like they think we're a thing. Tanis is going to come talk to you next. And I think that Goldmoon would be a little cold towards that and think, I don't need your approval, Tanis. Like, I really like you as a good friend, but why the heck are you doing this? I'm an adult. I can make my own choices, and Riverwind's body is still cold over there. We barely just got finished cremating it. So don't come to me with these sort of ideas and gossip. I don't appreciate this. And I think that the difference is, Tannis would kind of go, okay, I'm sorry. I'm just worried because, I'm worried about you. And well, he's a little clumsy. He might not quite word it perfectly, but I think Goldmoon would catch his meaning and go, okay, well, I appreciate your concern, but I'm a big girl. I can handle myself. Nothing's going to come of it right now because I'm still grieving. And I think that Tannis would kind of take the attitude, okay, well, I'm just trying to help. And where it ended in an argument to a limited extent with Gilthanas, or at least a cold discussion, Goldmoon, I can't see a fight resulting. Tannis and Goldmoon just seem like they were very civil with each other. At least at this point. I think that Goldmoon, the thought would not entirely be in our brain, still, because Riverwind. And I think that what would happen next is, weirdly, I don't think Laurana would take these whisperings very well. And I think Tannis would not try to tell her. Because bear in mind, him and Laurana were not really speaking during the journey to Tarsus.
Oh, that drama.
Yeah. And the thing is, I think Elistan... No, wait, I think Tannis would have probably spoken with Gilthanas. I'm going to recon out our previous idea. Although I think that Tannis would have talked to Gilthanas. That would not have gone well. Elistan would offer to talk to Goldmoon. That conversation would not go well. Goldmoon would be a little angry with Tannis, and Tannis would then go, okay, let's clear the air up. And then that would get cleared up. I only say that Elistan would go talk to her and probably mess up, because that might be more likely. And it would basically be the Keystone Cops here, just everybody bungling up. And somehow this will eventually lead to romance. But the funny thing is, Goldmoon, I think the ice would melt towards Tannis and go, okay, well, don't go. No, if you have something to say to me, don't go to Elistan. Well, okay, I was trying to avoid a fight, and he offered, and I thought, well, okay, he's better positioned to talk to you. And I think that would kind of melt. But where there'd be drama would be Laurana. And Laurana attracts drama like honey attracts a fly. And I only say that because that's true about the Chronicles. And I think that Laurana would kind of go in to scold her brother regarding getting with a human. Yeah, I know it seems a little hypocritical. But I think that at this point, Laurana would get a little... weirdly, I could see her being a little overprotective of her brother. Because the thing is, she knows... we got to bear in mind, she did not approve of the Silvara pairing. She hated the idea of Gilthanas getting with someone. Now, admittedly, Gilthanas was really blind to Silvara. And Laurana was right. But I think that at its core, there was a... We got to bear in mind, for Laurana, she had a lonely childhood. Her only real... Yes, she has her handmaidens for girlfriends, but the closest people in the world to her are Tannis and her brother. She doesn't really have too many other people. So I think that Goldmoon should have taken two. But the idea of Goldmoon getting with her brother would anger Laurana. And I think that she'd feel like she's losing her brother, just as she's kind of lost Tannis to an extent. And I think that this would cause her to complain bitterly to Gilthanas and to Goldmoon. I think Goldmoon would not really want to fight. And, well, would kind of fight, but would kind of go, what? I don't think Goldmoon would... I think Goldmoon would just think, how did this all blow up out of my control here? What the heck happened?
All I had was a few discussions with him and learned how to read and write from him.
Yeah, that'll probably require constant effort, like every night or two. So, mostly it's like an hour's conversation. All right, this is your A's, your B's, and your C's, and this is how you cross your T's. That's mostly what would have happened, but people misunderstood because also Tass. The glory that is Uncle Tass. Tasseloff barefoot at your service. I just love that catchphrase of this. Anyways, enough gushing about Tass. But I think that what might also happen is that Laurana would have a fight with Gilthanas. and Gilthanas would be angered. And now where Goldmoon would be like, okay, I will not actually throw accusations and harsh words at Laurana because, I don't want to fight that way with her. Because, I want to take the high ground. Gilthanas, high ground. Yeah, right. Sorry, Gilthanas. I don't mind throwing barbs at my baby sister. I may love her. She's my baby sister, but I'm going to throw everything in the kitchen sink at her. And I think that Gilthanas might, because Laurana would probably bring up think of your position. You are second in line. And I think that Gilthanas would kind of regard it as, yes, but at least I'm not chasing after Tanis after he spurned me and spending undue amounts of time with Elistan. What are you doing accusing me when your behavior is not exactly great? And the other difference is that we arrive at the crux of a problem here. Now, Eben would have kind of implied this earlier in Dragons of Autumn Twilight. I should have mentioned that. But the thing in Dragonlance is that there's a weird double standard that's held for elves and women. And the thing is that when it comes to if a male elf gets with a human woman, as seen in Soulforge, and even in the Elven Kinslayer Wars trilogy, I think it is, Elven Nations, I think it's titled. The woman is a okay, how do I word it? Because YouTube. And also, let's be polite. She's a woman of the night. She's not okay. And the elf man is scum. And hey, this is accused of women who genuinely fell in love with elf men. And the elf men were, in some cases, were not scum. They were just, it's love. What the heck are you doing? But there's this societal outlook on a lot of human societies' parts towards the elves and men. While with elvish society, there's a certain, why are you getting with a human woman? She's only going to be around for 50 years. And you're going to be around for another couple of 100 years. What the heck are you doing? While if it's a elf woman with a man, now the elf maiden in elvish society is a fool. Now, credit to the elves, that's all. That, for the most part, it ends there. In some cases, they do. Amongst the Sylvanesti, they're regarded as ladies of the night. But amongst the Qualinesti, it's just you're a fool. You're a ninny. That's it. Now, the human man, though, is a stud. So human society has this double standard, while the elves kind of judge both genders almost equally when it comes to, at least the Qualinesti elves, when it comes to this human-elf pairing. So the thing is, but the difference is that I don't think an elf man will lose his position, whereas an elf maiden probably will. Which, I'm not saying that's okay, it's just the way the society is. Societies are built like that. There's oxymorons, there's dichotomies, there's contradictory parts to it. It's just a world as it is. And the thing is that on the other hand, the Qualinesti, given the disasters that happened last time, there was an elf man with a human woman, Giselle and Kifkanon, and how one of Kifkanon's sons tried to murder him because Kifkanon was actually he wasn't always the best dad at times. There were times when he was good, other times Kifkanon had his faults. Great character, but he had his faults. But the thing is, I think that Gilthanas ordinarily would not be ejected from his position, but under Solastron and Porthios, who are the most xenophobic leaders in elvish history and all of fantasy fiction, yeah, he's a dead man. But on the other end, Laurana, I think, would, on her end, the thing is, she would probably end up insulting Gilthanas back, and I don't think the two would speak for the rest of the journey. And I think that there would be distance between Tanis and Gilthanas, Tanis and Laurana, Gilthanas and Tanis, and weirdly, not to speak ill of Laurana, I think she'd be a little passive aggressive with Tass and put distance with him. But it's not exactly Tass's fault. Kender's going to Kender. Like, they're going to gossip and whatnot. And the thing is, Tass would have probably seen it as, how did people think I said the two are getting together? Well, he might have actually inadvertently perceived that, now that I think about it. But he'd see it as, if they do, it's a beautiful thing, isn't it? Because it means that Goldmoon's wounded heart is being healed. And Gilthanas might finally unthaw.
The one thing that many elves might overlook when it comes to Goldmoon specifically is because
She brought back the old gods.
exactly, and that's something that they take rather seriously, and they might make an exception with her because it's like the second son, the Speaker of the Sun, God is with
Basically the second coming.
exactly,
And
and many would probably
yeah, you're
try and
right.
push Gilthanas towards leadership because of that.
Yeah, probably the peasants. Because the peasants I don't think, the peasants of Qualinesti, I don't think are like a nobility. You should never judge a society by its nobility, I find. Because the nobles are always the dumbest part of the society, for the most part. Not always, now that I think about it, but typically they're the dumbest part. Peasants are usually smarter. They just don't have the same benefits that the nobility have. It's just the nobility tends to waste the perks they got in life. It's just the ugly reality. And I think that Gilthanas would probably weirdly, I think he'd still be cold with Tanis, but I don't think they thought of, okay, just, sorry, I can't get what you said out of my brain, but I think that when it comes to that, I don't think Gilthanas would have thought about usurping his brother's place. Leadership, or I should say speakership, was never his thing. He never cared about it. Duty is everything. What does he care about? Position. And I think you were the one who said that him and Sturm are basically the same character, right? And it's kind of true. They are basically the same character, and he's gonna Gilthanas. I'm just gonna say that. Like, I don't know what else to say. Like, he's just gonna cling to his duty and his honor. But I think that of all the companions, weirdly, I'm gonna champion Sturm again. He'd be the one like, what do we care about gossip? Like, and he'd have been one of them, like, whom you'd have had Gilthanas going, I really don't care what the humans think. You'd have Laurana going, yeah, but it's my brother. And you have Tanis going, oh, I'm just trying to make sure nobody gets hurt. And Sturm would just see it as, gossip is beneath us. No Knight of Solamnia would ever sing to this and whatnot. Sorry, that's Sturm. He's sanctimonious at times, but I love him. But
Oh yeah.
But I think he'd be right. He's like, this is all beneath us. If they get together, good. We'll drink to their joy. And if not, then it was never our place to interfere. And this would probably be the only time Raceland would agree with him and go, sense from the bucket-headed Solamnic Knight. Miracles do happen. Perhaps the old gods have indeed returned. And Raceland would mock him that way. And Sturm would then flush red and, for barbs. But once in Tarsus, though, I think that where things would get a little different is when Laurana throws a bit of her, how do I word it? Now, her and Tanis have an argument in the inn in front of the innkeeper. I think that because Laurana wanted to be put in the room next to Ellie Stans, and Tanis didn't feel comfortable with that. And I think we do have to bear in mind rank there. Like, an elf princess next to a man's room. Oh, boy. And both of them are in their rooms alone. Like,
in their respective rooms alone. And she requested that they be put right next to each other. It's not something that's going to go over well at the time. Like today, we might not care, but back then,
It would have been a big deal.
she's a princess requesting to be next to another guy, to a guy's room. But it'd be different if it was like a relative. But I think that here I might give Goldmoon a bit of credit. I think Goldmoon would volunteer. How about I stay in the room with her? And Tennis would go, "Are you sure?" And it's like, "Yeah, okay, I could chaperone." Lorana would not appreciate Goldmoon's interference here, but Goldmoon would see it as, well, maybe it's to mend the peace between the parts of this big, unhappy family.
So we'd have a girls' sleepover, a girls' slumber party.
We would have, but the guards show up. The guards of Tarsus. I think there'd just be the offer, and Tannis would be grateful. Guards show up, take everyone to court, and it becomes a court drama. Because of course it does. And I think before Gregory House can say my staff are all idiots, and Alhana can try to, stumble on in. I'm just kidding. As far as how we're going to divide the teams, I'm actually going to say weirdly, I don't think they should be divided differently this time around. Now, if we were to do, if we were doing a fanfic of, let's say, more focused on, let's say, Tika, and where I think that we'd probably put her in Sturm's team, but I actually think that this lineup works fine. Like, Waze and Hickman did have good reasons for positioning the teams the way they did. I just think maybe Tika should have been in Sturm's team only because distance between her and Karamon, so that you can build up the pairing from a distance. Distance makes the heart fonder, I think, is a Japanese proverb, doesn't it? Isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And just as in the West, we tend to say familiarity breeds contempt. I'm joking. Which is how I feel about Celestron and Porthios. I'm joking. I haven't said I hate them. Sorry, I have to.
Their entire existence is one worth of contempt.
Yeah, it's very contemptible. But I think that when it comes to Gilthanas and Goldmoon, by now they would have probably become really good friends. And I think now throughout Winter Night, you would have the two characters at a distance from each other. You'd also have Goldmoon at a distance from Lorana. And weirdly, I think she'd really miss Lorana in a big sister, little sister type of way. So we're building on that kind of friendship there. And I do think it's very important because, Gilthanas is a guy who really likes his little sister. He cares deeply for her. I think, though, that where Gilthanas would kind of start to veer away from his brother and father is that they have a lot of contempt for humans. And when they make a lot of their comments near the lands of the Kaganestes, I think that Gilthanas would probably be a little less enthusiastic. Well, not that he is enthusiastic, but more, he might actually frown and not be impressed. I know it doesn't seem like much, but it hints at what lies beneath the surface. As for Goldmoon, I think that she would kind of miss some of the intellectual debates with Gilthanas and kind of miss her bonding with Lorana, as said. On the other hand, given that Lorana is doubtful of her faith and doubtful of her own abilities, she would need to, I think, she starts to spread the true faith, but I think that she'd have a bit of imposter syndrome in the in Dragons of Winter Night, because she'd feel that she's spreading a faith she herself had moments of doubt towards and failed against Verminard. So what you have here is something that is kind of a ticking time bomb. And I think that
she would kind of feel like she's probably gonna screw up at some point. And so I think that when the time comes for her to maybe confide in Tanis, something like this, Tanis would probably try to provide comfort and kindness. And I think that he would, like, he'd pretty much tell her, like, you can't expect too much from yourself. But I also think that Tanis would actually go on to ask, so what was up with you and Gilthanas? I do think he'd ask about that, and Goldmoon would be honest, like, nothing. There was nothing going on. And that's where I could see Tanis probably taking the idea, oh, okay, because, like, at the time I was a little upset, but, now that I've had time to, I think Tanis would have taken up the attitude, now that I've had time to think about it, it would cost him his rank, but he was never attached to it. It might be good, if only if it helps you overcome your loss and your doubt. And I think at this point, Goldmoon, who it's been months since the loss, would probably have the sense that, okay, I'll start thinking about it, but she's still going to be, she's no longer grieving as hard because she's had more time, but she's, like, the thing about losses like that is they never quite leave you. You just learn to endure them better. But with her sense of doubt and her sense of failure, she would confide in Tanis, but Tanis would. It's also a matter that I think, now that I think about it, sorry, I'm trying to work it through in my head. I think that she would still have those lingering doubts, and Tanis would try to tell her, well, you can depend on Gilthanas, myself, Cameron, and the rest if it comes down to it. And Goldmoon would thank him, but this is where I'd say there should be a gift of foresight to an extent. She says, and if none of you are present at hand when the time comes, you have Tanis, then remember the strength of your own heart, or something like that, where he does give some good counsel. And where Goldmoon, still unsure of things, and you have over on Sturm's team, maybe, in a way, I think Gilthanas, the trouble is he'd make his breakup worst in this what if. And now he would still end up with Silvara for a short time. We're not diverging from that. It still leads to disaster because it has to.
Of course.
But I think that with him, you would have had Laurana, like, later. I could see her maybe trying to talk to her brother, like, okay, Silvara made a mistake. That's all. It's just a small mistake. You have Gilthanas, she lied to me. Yeah, but it's a small mistake. Goldmoon wouldn't have lied. To an extent, or like the conversation would veer in that direction where Laurana would be like, I don't understand. Like, Silvara just told a few lies, and I think Gilthanas would probably say something to the effect of, then that means if the start of the relationship was a lie, that means the rest was all a lie. And I think Laurana would try to tell him not everything. Like, maybe you've spent too much time with Goldmoon and think that every woman is like that, but not every woman is. And you kind of got to adjust your standards. And I think Gilthanas would be insulted by that and salty and say, well, Goldmoon may not be perfect, but she wouldn't have lied to me to that extreme. But I don't think Gilthanas would be keen on a relationship just yet with another woman because he just got over a really bad breakup, which, as much Silvara's fault as his own, because you have a compulsive liar and you have a guy whom no one could ever meet the moral standards for the most part. So it's a bit like putting Captain Jack Sparrow and Ludwig van Beethoven in the same room and telling them, become an item. It's not going to go over well.
So the blood on the wall, whose does it belong to?
Probably Sparrow.
And he's got a piano. Like we both studied history, so he just needs the piano wire, and there won't be a Jack Sparrow anymore.
Captain
Jack
Sparrow.
Sparrow. Yeah. But as to so the breakup happens, and so Gilthanas is left with being very, very salty for one thing, but also with the understanding that he, not to say he bungled, but he has kind of this passionate love affair of his has fallen apart. He has screwed it up. He himself did screw it up, but so did Silvara. And that's where she is now his dragon for the remainder of the war. That includes up to the High Clara's Tower and afterwards. Well, actually, he comes in afterwards because he's off screen for a bit because there's the whole Dragonlance forging and him having to come to the rescue and whatnot. And you have the Golden General's armies. That's a great arc. That's a great stuff. So Gilthanas is out of the picture for a while, and that should be the case because the main characters of the story, I would argue, of the actual novel should be pretty much the Magier twins and Tanis and Laurana to an extent. But on the other hand, I think that under our fan fiction, we should bear in mind Goldmoon would be more of a main character than Gilthanas, and then what she really was. Because in the first novel, she's essentially probably the main character, but in the two other novels, she's not. We're just keeping her role almost the same for the latter two novels. Now, in Spring Dawning, at the beginning, Tanis had failed to return to his companions after spending time with Kitiara, and he had failed to properly lie to Kit, who immediately saw, oh, my brothers are here, as is, well, everyone I pretty much want, except for the green gemstone man, Barum. And Tanis then ended up foolishly leading one of her men inadvertently to the ship. And when even he knew Kitiara would not trust him, that Kitiara would seek to use him to find the others and destroy them.
Yeah.
And he did not divulge. He tried to cover his own rear. Once again, I'm going to be honest, Goldmoon would act the same way, but we have to bear in mind when Tanis somehow turns this into being Raceland's fault, that still has to happen. Everything plays out the same way. Except at the point in the story when Goldmoon is written out and where she because she's pregnant, she's not here. So she actually has to go along with Caramon, Tanis, and the rest. And since she has the blue crystal staff and the enemy is after the blue crystal staff and Barum, they basically make a show of trying to bring her in as a prisoner along with, well, the green gemstone man. Now, what I would propose is that, let's see, Gilthanas still has to take up leadership of the Golden General armies because Laurana's ditched to go take Kitiara at her word. Yeah, that was such a ninny decision. And this is where, okay, you know what? I think maybe we should end the stream here because I'm going to need to do a bit more reading and research in order to properly stage and set up the end of Spring Dawning. Because the thing is, there's a lot of, like, Wace and Hickman did a great job setting up the scene and whatnot, but I know I got a good idea of what to do with Goldmoon to an extent, but Gilthanas and whatnot, because I'm wanting to change a few things, but I don't know
exactly how. I'd have to reread it again, primarily the ending, which I have reread the novel enough times. But hey, this is a good excuse to reread it. And I think that one should set it up perfectly. I'll probably end up, I think maybe next stream like this, we're gonna have to do Spring Dawning and the end of the War of the Lance. Now, I'd argue the War of the Lance continues until Raistlin and Kitiara's deaths, because that's basically a continuation. And I think that we should take the time to research what Gilthanas was up to at that time. And what this would mean is also getting into probably the second generation with Goldmoon and Gilthanas to an extent. So it would require a bit of research on second generation and on Spring Dawning. Now, I don't have any notes for this stream, as you guys have been able to see, so I had to go off memory. So next time, I'll definitely have to have notes on hand, because there's a lot more details to bear in mind. So I had wanted to kind of stretch this out longer, but I'm arriving at the end of my rope, so to speak, and I'm pretty sleep deprived as well. So we're going to pull it to a close here. I think we did a good job of covering most of the chronicles, and we'll then get into next time into Spring Dawning Legends, and to maybe start flirting with the second generation and what this pairing would actually, how it might come about, and what it would mean in universe, because it would have explosive consequences.
Oh, yes.
I do agree with Gilthanas fathering a half-elf. I always thought that should happen. But on the other hand, I never considered the possibility of Goldmoon. So this is where I do want the research in order to look into and reread Gilthanas' Odyssey, probably, and look into what Goldmoon was up to, and how to kind of approach things. But anyways, tell us what you think in the comment section down below, and don't forget to smash that like and that subscribe button, because we're almost at 1,000 and we need your help to get there. We need you. And yeah, smash it like your let me think. Well, I guess Huma trying to take down Takhisis. Man, I am sleep deprived.
Oh, I would like to see
Okay.
take down Kitiara.
Yeah, everyone would like to. Yeah, anyways. Do take care, everyone, and wish you all the